Oh man. All right, next up is the winter goddess. She is a very beautiful goddess. And the main issue that I saw with this one is the confusion of light sources. What happened was you had the main winter goddess there. You shaded her beautifully. The colors are very beautifully chosen. But there were some main issues. What I'm going to do is point at them first, and then I'm going to go in and change them up. And please work, Mrs. Tablet. You stop fucking around. Okay. All right. Uh, All right. Everything's good. So the first issue with this is that you have this large head of hair, this large piece. And in a painting, what happens is this reads as, uh, when you zoom out, it changes the composition. This reads as a major unit of the composition. Um, what that will do to your painting is it will direct the attention, the focal attention away, because there are different ways to get the focus in a painting. There's different ways you can have a focal point. The focal point can be created with a lot of contrast, so lights against of darks, deep lights against deep darks, and then there is detail level, so the size of your brush, and then finally there is size. If there is a big object in your painting, whether or not it's against a light object or whether or not it's detailed, the size itself will demand the attention. So in this case, what you're doing accidentally is you're demanding a certain kind of attention be drawn towards her. Even though you've got detail and contrast happening here, my tablet is still fucked up. The attention is being, or there's a competition for the focal point in this painting. So what I suggest is choosing a different kind of distribution or scatter for the hair shape. That's one. Two, then we've got the light source confusion. The light source confusion is in the fact that she herself has these objects on her that are light enough to be considered. You have two choices. Either bring these units, this armor that she's got on, down a couple levels and just represent them as a metallic material, or make them the light source and then make her the glowing, beautiful, ethereal, beautiful person that she is that represents wintertime. So that means if you were to do that, that you have to reorganize the entire light source communication, as I said earlier, between these different light sources. You have to reorganize the entire image of the painting or the entire feel of the painting. So what happens is, first of all, what I always recommend when you're playing around with this kind of theme is get a wash for your drawing. A wash means that there is a unifying light source, a unifying color throughout the canvas. What that means is that you're going to choose one color that will be the source of all of the colors that are. Why is my driver not working? God damn it. I hate you, Wacom. It will be the one color that all of the colors are chosen from. So when I turn this off, you'll see that you've got some purple fighting with the blue. What I recommend, especially because she's a winter goddess, and to reinforce the theme of the winter time, very cool, is choose one cool tone that will be the principal cool tone. You've got principal cool tone in purple and the principal cool tone in the blue. You got to choose one and then derive the blue from that purple, or the purple from that blue. So if you wanted to go purple, you have you have to go through the navies and then you get into the purple. So you have this graduation into the purple instead of just jumping straight into purple. Just off the color picker. So it's very dangerous to mess around and choose colors that are not neighbors in the color wheel or not neighbors in the color picker, because they're gonna compete. So the main diagnosis for this painting is that you've got a lot of competition between focal point and color, and and light source, and that's what's making this image very difficult to look at, because you don't know really where you're supposed to look at. You've got this intense detail level over here happening with the crash of the ice, and then you've got the intense detail here. Remember, guys, when you're doing a portrait or you're doing a character, the detail is like a radius. It's like a scope of detail. We've got 100% detail and the most important part of the character design, which is the bust. The bust is the most important thing about the character design, whether it's concept art or not. It's really the most important thing. Why? Because the character personality and the character face and the identity of the character, so the face of the character, is in that bust area. So meaning this has to be 100% detail of whatever amount of detail you want to invest in it. So if it's going to be painterly, if it's going to be fully rendered, this is the 100% relative detail level you're ever going to get. Everything outside of this scope happens in like a sort of like radius. The further away you are from this center of focus, the less detail you're supposed to have, because you're trying to get the viewer to look back into the painting. Okay? So is everybody with me? The person who painted this, Christy, is he gone? Did he go? Well, if he's gone, you guys can still benefit from it. So that's basically the main issues here. So let me go in and try to just apply these corrections instead of just babbling about them. So I'm going to bring in that color wash that I was talking about. And the purple that I will choose will be a purple that comes out of this color palette, this wash. It will be a purple that helps reinforce the theme. And the theme in this case is this winter goddess. So she is purpley bluish, and what we want to do is make sure that that purple and that blue that we're going to be painting are neighbors. They're not from different DNA kind of the color. So we're not talking about a pastel purple, which is what we had, versus a metallic blue. We want to make sure that there's an equal sort of understanding between the colors, and that we're choosing them from a very close area in the color picker. And now for the purple for the hair, what I'm going to do is just drop tool the base tone here, somewhere in the mid-tones, and then move my color picker out into the purples, and make sure, simply moving the hue doesn't mean you're going to be getting neighbor colors. No, it's sort of a very tricky little way of approaching your color. And remember, you don't need to go straight into purple. You can get into the navies and it will still look purple compared to that blue, because colors act differently when they're around each other. It's not going to be the same color. So compared to what we had before, so if you can see it and how it's graduating into the purples, this navy, which is a navy, it's not a purple, is looking purple compared to the blue that we had before. So this is basically the kind of purple you can afford to use in this kind of painting. Now I'm just going to place that navy all over her flesh, especially in the areas that the light is touching, because remember, where there is light there is saturation, where there is light there is hue, and there is more of the color DNA coming in, or that color code, or that more of the color itself coming in. So then you've got the issue with the light sources. I'm still iffy about this whole head of hair. I'm just thinking maybe I should get rid of it. You see what happens when we get rid of it. It's really taking over the painting. I'm working with my navigator here to make sure. The way to check if you're using the sizes are too large is to use your navigator. The navigator is great for that. It's a great tool. It helps you see the image from a distance instead of having to walk away from it as we do traditionally. It helps you see if the focal point is being reinforced, if the focal point is being allowed to be the focal point. So what's happening here now is, if you want to place in the hair, it would have to be done in a way that is friendly and not demanding the attention be drawn away from the focal point, because we want the focal point to be, again, reinforced. Okay, forgive me. Forgive my perfectionism. I'm going to place in some of that. And the darkness that we place this hair in should not be that dark. It should be a step down from how dark we're getting in the face, so that the direction be again drawn back to the light source, or to the focal point, and the light source is telling us what the focal point is. So there shouldn't be that much shading applied to the hair. There shouldn't be that much detail. That you shouldn't be painting with a 1 pixel size brush for per hair strand. That's like the biggest mistake you can make when painting hair. Hair needs to be painted in chunks. I'm not sure if this is her ear. I'm going to treat it like it's her ear. If she's got black hair, it's a nice sort of design contrast you've got going, but be careful of the black. Black is one of those things that defines a focal point, because it's part of the relationship of contrast, so it's part of that big formula, and you want to be careful how dark you go in areas that are not detailed. And now we're going to be treating, I'm going to bring this white down, because you've got a pure white going on here. Now I'm going to be treating like her armor is the light source. So I'm going to be choosing a darker color. When I go darker in a cool zone, which in a cool wash, I have to go darker and apply more cool. So it would have to be a purpley dark, because I have to reinforce that purple again one more time. So it would have to be a dark navy that is the sort of the night frost around her. I'm probably going to use multiply on that. Yeah, that's much better. And what I'm doing is she has now become the light source. All the light source is coming out of her. So this means that it's going to be tricky for you to figure out exactly which are the dominant light sources. So you're dividing the primary light source into maybe 3 separate light sources, and those will be the dominant ones. And then you're going to have the secondary light sources, probably her bikini or her necklace would have to be the secondary light source in this case. And so we're darkening this image up and treating her as if she is the light source. I'm going to put it on a color dodge layer. I don't usually do this in my paintings, but for the sake of time, I'm going to have to do that. I am just using the color dodge layer to bring about a diffuse over this form of her body. And I need to do that because there is a certain glow that is happening that is distorting the color of her skin. So all of this, of course, you can do with more time on your hands. I just have to rush through these. But the principles are essentially the same. I'm going to bring that down. And now I'm going to focus which light sources are the dominant light sources. So if you're painting a girl, especially if you're painting it for League, you know the boobs are the most important thing. And then I'm going to use the light source of the necklace to reflect light back into her cheek line or her jawline. I'm going to zoom in. Working zoomed out is actually a really good idea if you're confusing the light sources or just messing around with the light sources. Working zoomed out will really help you. Okay, so the side of her cheek, or that corner, the quarter of her cheek that we see on 3/4 view is the side of the cube. This side is what is capturing the light sources. Right over here, we're getting the light source on the side of her nose. And then I'm going to decrease the light of her eyes and bring in a color for them, because what we're doing is making her seem like she's some sort of golem of sorts. Now what we're doing is now we're going to have to start reflecting this light source along the cube of everything else. And so we have to make sure the color that's reflected is both reflected in hue and in intensity. And so all of this that you've got here, this dark core shadow stretching around the image, this is going to be diffused over and over and over again. Because what's happening, and it's going to be diffused along the 3-dimensional shape that she is. So the sides of the cube, remember this is all about the cube. So the size of her thigh, and then we're going to have that clash of light sources. And then there is this main light source that's illuminating her body. I guess it's the sunlight, or maybe it's some sort of base or something. But remember, everything lights up according to a light source, and it's the surface areas that are reflecting the light back. The light doesn't get to touch everything. It's only around the areas that the light source can reach. Lightsource has access to, and it's a relationship of parallel lines. The surface area, imagine that the surface area is releasing a laser, and imagine the light source is releasing its own laser that's light ray, which, if they become parallel with each other, it means there's a relationship, and the surface area is illuminated in that relationship. So I've explained that in the other video. I know that's really vague, as I've said before. It just makes no sense if I talk about it. It would have to be a diagram. But that's pretty much all that that lighting really is, and shading. I'm going to lighten up her thigh. It's a bit dark. You might want to rethink the background. You're over framing, and this kind of framing that happens, those two trees, it's kind of cheesy. I know cheesy is a very I don't know, mean word to use as well as vague, but it's cheesy because you're overstating the fact that she's the attention. Don't worry, she is the attention of the image. The detail and the contrast and the light source is all reinforcing the fact that she is the center of this image. You don't need to go to a level where you're framing her with trees. These trees don't look natural. The more that you have of the real world reflected in your image, the more that we as the audience can believe it. There was a slight issue with fat distribution on her stomach, and then there is the symmetry of the breasts that was an issue as well. And there's also the thigh problem. And this is sort of a good base to start with if you want to keep shading. What I would recommend you do is I recommend you go one huge level down, one massive value level down, and I think the color mode that really helps you do that is on multiply. And this way you can build your way up. So now that you've taken everything down a level, you can start building your way up and illuminate only the areas that truly need illumination. So what we're talking about is illumination in the eyes as the main focal point, because she is still a feature. She is still a night goddess, winter goddess kind of thing. And if you really want to represent her as glowing, if you have a glowy little thing that can glow, where would you want to place it to show its glowy, its most glowy nature? Of course you have to put it into a dark environment so that you can take advantage of its glowiness, so that you can exhibit its glowiness. So I recommend a night scene for this one. You had the daytime, and it was sort of breaking up the theme that was happening. So now that we brought it down one level, we're going to have to start reinforcing these tiny units as the light sources. And in this case, you have some opportunity to detail, and meaning that even these little crowns have sides to them and have the cube as well. Just a touch on the areas that are moving away from the face. This area would be a little darker, and slight illumination on it. And then I'm just going to up the contrast on her face area. Then move that down into her breasts, into that space between them, because that's where the light source is really happening. It's being reflected, because remember, on the body there are both matte reflections, or just units or gradual tones, and then there is the actual moisture levels that vary throughout the body. So you have to make sure that you're reflecting the right kind of texture and the right kind of surface moisture. And whenever you build 3D objects, make sure that you're building them up in a way where you're reflecting the fact that they have a climax or a zenith. So if you want to, like I always show my students, if you want to show that there is a spherical ball, what you do is you don't just shade it from one side all the way and then one side is brighter than the other side. What you do is that you shrink your brush and build it along the height or the altitude, the approaching altitude of that area. So what we're doing is that light spot right there on that 3D object is built somewhere along the angle that's reflected back toward the light source, where the light source is. So it would look something like this. This looks more realistic because now we're not just working with a gradual tone. This looks like a sphere. So when you're working with the breasts are also working like that. They're reflecting the light like that. So we're building the light source along the side or the surface area of the breasts and we're responding to where the light source is. That's one. And then two, we're representing the 3D form of the breasts as well. So the sides, everything has this as well. Everything, every little object in this painting has this three-dimensional form. So you're building along the sides of the three-dimensional form. Find the surface area and reflect to the light source, reflect the light source along that surface area. Which area is the most exposed versus the areas that are not exposed to the light source. The light, again, does not touch everything. This is another example of not planning your image. When you plan your image, when you invest some time into planning your image and planning the painting that you want to work on, you're planning it both in light source and focal point and the color palette. What I do before I start my paintings is I choose my color palette, get it out of the way, and just pick from my color palette that I've already chosen. So I don't have to waste time, valuable application time, choosing my light source color. Another thing is choosing your light source. Where is your light source coming from? Choosing the light source is going to help you define the form. What are the major cast shadows and what are the major gradual tones that are happening in the painting? And then finally, choosing the object itself. Are you going to be having this illuminated armor on her, or are you going to be having this this metallic armor that's reflecting the light source? And of course, find a primary light source, cast those shadows, and then plan on having a diffuse shadow happen in the painting as well. Diffusing the main light sources, diffusing the coarse shadows that are making everything look a bit too dark. Especially if she's a glowy object herself, she is going to have lots of diffuse happening. It's going to seem like she herself is glowing. And that's another thing that I just wanted to add before I go. If you wanted to make her seem like she was glowing, even if her whole body was glowing, the main glow and the main contrast of that glow would happen. I don't have time for that, but the main glow would happen around the center, the top area of her body. So let me see if I can do that real quick just to show you what I mean if she was the glowy object. I don't know where I've seen, oh, Dr. Manhattan. If you've ever seen Dr. Manhattan, he's so glowy. And the reason why they even managed to be able to portray him in the movie, in the comic book, it was sort of easy to portray him because he just had to choose a really light blue color. But in the movie, it was difficult because they were working with CGI, and they had to make him look realistic. So what they did was they sort of treated it as if the light source, he was a light source, but the light source had shades in him. And by doing that, we're sort of treating it both as the light source and the shiny object, but also as the shade that is needed to keep this object looking realistic. It also would just be a big light in the shape of a human, and that's not going to help you portray this as a character. So that's sort of what I'm doing. I'm building the light source upward towards her. I'm still using really high value, but I'm building the light source upward. And then finally, it would be, yeah, it was the shift tool. It would be the darkness behind her that is necessary. Oopsie. We need to darken the area behind her and make sure that that area is also dark and reflecting the fact that she is in a dark area and she is the light source diffusing that darkness. So I'm just darkening that area behind her, and you see how she's starting to emerge, starting to look a little bit more realistic. And we're seeing how dark her thigh area was. We're seeing that there was major confusion, major confusion happening with the light source. It wasn't focused. So what I'm going to do now is just, again, work as if she is that light source, reflecting back and allowing herself to be visible. Diffusing any areas on her form where there is an interruption and a sudden new light source that's making her seem like she doesn't belong in her environment. And you see how now it's starting to reflect the fact that she is the light source and everything around her is illuminated by her. If you have other units in the image that are by her or something, they would also get some of the light source that she is casting off. So let's say that there is some ice flying away. Ice doesn't glow, but she does. And so what that's going to do is show that she is the light source allowing this ice to be visible. Of course, it can't be as bright as her. She is still the focal point. So at this point, you notice that there is a certain list that you have to follow in your painting process. And this list, if you just make it, it's part of the planning. If you just follow this list closely, a list of fundamentals, if you follow this list closely, what happens is that you will benefit. It's not going to deteriorate your style. At this level, I don't see that you are proficient enough in the fundamentals to be even thinking about developing your own style. And this is something that I talked about a lot in the book that I recently wrote. It's not in your responsibility yet as a beginner, intermediate, or even advanced to choose a style. Trust in the rules. The rules will guide you towards creating a realistic looking character that will impress your audience and will impress your employers. And that's you as the artist. You have to know the real to create the unreal. So you have to know the rules of physics and how to make something look realistic. After a great deal of years and years spent in the practice of the fundamentals, at that point you will be ready somewhat to start breaking the rules and inventing your own style, similar to the way Picasso started breaking the rules and made his own data style or abstraction style. So you're not ready for that. You, I promise you, will benefit if you just start making a list of the fundamentals you get back through critique. So light source is the most important thing. Cast shadows need to be cast along the form of the object, contouring with the contours of the object that the light source is being cast upon. Surface areas that are facing the light. These are all rules. And these are rules that I talk about over and over and over again in my videos. I cannot stress enough how important it is to start investing time making a list. And this list would be just a Word document or a notebook, a note document, or just a notebook that you have rules in. Post it on the wall in front of your monitor. Look at it and say, in this painting that I'm painting right now, me as the artist, have I started planning? Did I plan? Am I thinking about these rules? Did I choose a light source yet? If you haven't even chosen a light source, and then now you're telling me that the armor is the light source, this is confusion, and this is an amateur mistake. And I don't mean to say that you guys are amateurs when you make these mistakes, but they're mistakes that are easily avoidable if, number one, you expose yourself to critiques and make sure that you escape the tunnel vision that you're in as a student, as the painter. So this tunnel vision will be interrupted and you'll be like, oh my God, holy crap, I haven't even chosen a light source yet. And that's basically what happened with you. So that's it. I'm going to be going over the rest of the critiques hopefully for the next 30 minutes. If it's going to hit 2 hours, I should have expected that the first day would hit 2 hours. But I hope that helped you, Christy. So flatten the image. Let me show you the before and after. Here it's starting to look like an actual illustration, something you'd see in a character design concept sheet or something. And before, what we had is this entire confusion of light sources. We had a body that was responding to a light source, not even visible on the screen. We had a color palette that was from two different entire maps along the color picker. And we have this massive object of hair interrupting the focal point. And then we had the objects in the back that were sort of chosen in a way to overstate the focus even one more time, even though there was no focus. There was something in the background telling us, oh, this is the focus, but it's not, and I'm telling you that it's not the focus. The focus was supposed to be the head bust. This is the 100% detail area. And outside, anything moving outside of that radius would be less. Now she is looking like she's in a dark area. We've interrupted this color confusion. We've brought in a main wash. So this is the color of the night right now. It's a blue painting. You can have other colors over a wash, but they have to be derived from the essential palette. And the palette that's chosen is from one main color that you choose. So that's rule number one, Christy. Write it down. Choose a color wash. That wash will govern the color palette for the rest of your life in that painting. I mean, that's a bit epic, but for the rest of the painting. Then choose the actual character. What kind of character is it? What is she wearing? And then choose the light source direction. Where is the direction coming from? Is she the light source? Is there other light sources diffusing the main core shadows? And then, of course, it's just a matter of fundamentals and studies after that. Make sure you know how to shade a body, learn about anatomy a touch more, spend a bit more planning her pose. There is so much space to plan in a painting. I mean, if you don't plan, you're just losing the fun. The fun is in the planning, honestly, if you ask me. finding the pose that works for you and placing it in there and messing around with the light source. That's why we're here, because it's fun. Yes, I'm going to post it on YouTube so you can watch it then. You're very welcome, Christy. I hope it helped. Show me other stuff that you do. Send me a message on Facebook. I'll be happy to take a look at it. Finally, we're getting to the others. The green man. I'm going to jump into this. I have a bit of a video here on my YouTube about secondary light sources. So the first problem was that he was off to the side. The image wasn't centered around him. Center your canvases around your characters. One other thing that you can write down as well for the list is choosing the kind of canvas size. Make sure that in the list you know where you're putting the object on the canvas. You even have to think about that tiny detail. It's all about design and composition. So when you're thinking about where you want to place your character, make sure you're placing your character in a way where the canvas size and the canvas shape and the bordering is all reinforcing the presence of your character. Imagine it's a photo shoot. Would you take a picture of a guy, unless it's editorial or something, or unless you're deliberately trying to confuse people, would you take a canvas and only put half the guy in there if it's a fashion shoot, or if it's something that is exhibiting this guy specifically? Would you not have the frame all around him specifically? You want to be able to show that he's the center of attraction, and you want to show that because he is the center of attraction, everything is centered around him so that all his units are visible and accessible to the human eye. And so the tiniest little centering problem that you might have will lead to this issue. So I'm confused. Where is the light source coming from? I'm going to make it so that the light source is coming from the side, meaning that this part of his head would be darkened up. You've got this glowy, yeah, we're going to have to just focus a little bit more on the light source. So you've got the primary light source coming from the side, right over here, coming from his right, and it's revealing the main parts of him as much as we need it to, because we've got other light sources here we're messing around with. And so some of that light source is going to be interrupted because of his armor. So not his whole face is going to be visible. Alright, so we cast that shadow. This light source on his arm is a bit too strong. And I'm just going to throw one big wash over it, and then I'm going to cast that light. And then on the side of his chest, revealing his form, and then on the abs and the sides that are exposed. Remember, the side of the cube, it's all about the cube. Go back to the cube. It's all about that. His abs are a bit contorted. I know he's in a pose, but the abs wouldn't be that affected by that pose. It's mostly the hips that are affected. There's a slight tilt, but remember, as a student, you're told to do a certain thing. You're going to overcompensate and do too much of that thing. It's all about the tiny nuances, guys. It's not about, overdoing it. Don't overdo it. And saying don't overdo it is a bit vague. Again, it's not really helping you. But just be careful that you're not overstating the things that shouldn't be overstated. Again, that's still vague, not really helpful. I'm going to cubify his head a little bit because it was a bit spherical. It kind of looked like it was artificial or like alien type. I'm just going to give it those bumps that the underlying skeletal structure does to the scalp. I'm going to align his eyes along a symmetry line. Good job on the face, though. A lot of personality. Very nice work. And now I'm going to start thinking about the secondary light source here. Every part of the cube along this entire half of his body will be responding to this light source, meaning every surface area that has a parallel linear reflection. Again, that's very vague, forgive me. It's kind of academic terms I don't want to use in my critiques, but that's pretty much what it is. All of those units will be reflecting this light source back. And this is called a diffuse light. This is diffusing the core shadow that happened along the side of the or along the dark side of the main light source that was happening. So this is the kind of light I'm expecting to be reflected back by this armor if his arm really was glowing that much. Because that's the only way that we have to reinforce the fact that this arm is big and glowy. I mean, if there is nothing capturing this light source, then there's a problem with this glowy arm. It's in another dimension, not affecting our dimension. He's a Jerset flexor. He's cramming him like mad to show his peeps. His units. I'll let myself. What are you guys talking about? Whoop, whoop. I'm gonna also blend because I'm sorry for not blending. Blur. I don't have time to blur and blend. Blend. I have to blur. Now I'm just going to defuse just a touch. Also, if you're squint your eyes right now, everybody squint your eyes and just look at how intense this arm is. We really want to break that up. We want to break that up in a way that is also effective, so we don't want to lose an opportunity to add some detail. So I'm just going to get one of my handy dandy super duper texture brushes, and I'm just going to choose the dark shadow. Remember how we shaded that glowy girl? So what we're doing now is we're just shading this glowy arm, but in just a slight shade less than we had before. So select inverse, delete. So now we have a lot less light coming through, but it's an opportunity to shade his broken skin. You know, it's like magma. The magma is sort of causing that break in his skin, the way you would see lava coming out and creating like little breaks in the surface area of the or like the dry, cool part of the earth as the magma comes through, breaking it up. So you have like a lot of space to really bring in some texture. Don't just use a raw texture, by the way. Paint away at it. You have a lot of space here to become a little bit more detailed. So don't just use a raw texture and just throw it over top. What I'm going to do, this is a really cool trick. Everyone pay attention. I get the shadows, the burn tool on shadows, turned off protect tones, exposure like somewhere at 10. And I'm going to burn at the magma, this relationship between yellow and orange. And I'm just burning at it. Now it looks like there's that magma contrast, right? It's crazy. And now I'm going to get the dodge tool on highlights. Protect tones is turned off, 12%. It's usually where I place my dodge and burn. And now I'm going to just highlight away at the area where there is the most light coming through. So look at all this detail that we've now invested into this image. Of course, the detail level has expanded. It's more than the face, which is a mistake. And that's why zooming out is so essential, because you start to review it. Zoom out is a review of what's happening. I'm also going to add in the glow, which is really important, because anything that has light, anything that is a light source is a light source in its value, and the fact that it's reflecting its color on everything else, and in the fact that it has a glow to it. So there needs to be that sort of torch glow as well. I'm going to erase away the area of that glow inside the hand because it's too bright. And then merge down. Okay, and then we've got the same thing going on here. I don't want this tertiary light source to be stronger than, I'm going to take away this detail. It's taking a lot of attention away from these light sources. I don't want it to be stronger than the secondary or primary light sources, but I do want it to be a light source. It's a nice little touch. What you have is an opportunity to change the color. So you've already got one light source that's orange, one light source that's blue. You can mess around and bring in some sort of mechanical glow, some sort of I'm going to say some sort of for like another minute. I don't know, a scientific glow. And that's sort of bringing in another light source color that is reinforcing the color of the background. And then finally there's the wash that you neglected as well. I'm going to get the color mode, and I'm just going to place that gray wash in everything there, in all the areas where there is no light. There is neither the blue primary or the orange secondary. And I'm going to place it in that clash area. I have a video about this. The clash is basically the shadow that lines along between the two light sources. So you've got a primary light source, then you've got the coarse shadow reflected, then you've got the secondary light source diffusing it, but not completely. There's just this line, this sliver of light source in between. So the background color, I used it in all the areas where there is no light touching. He's got glowy eyes, which is another light source that you added in. And again, it's with the planning. Do you really want 4 light sources happening along the image? If you do, of course, that's your choice. But I recommend just having tops 3, just carrying the image through. Trust me, 3 will work. Even those crazy League of Legends splashes have like 3 tops. And if all they need is 3, I think you're good. So I'm using some of that primary light source on his armor because I want to see some of that. I want to see more light effect. Remember guys, when the light is reflected, when a light reflects, and I've said this already, it reflects its intensity and its color. That's what it's reflecting. Cast shadows happening here from these little spikes. Spikes are casting shadows on each other. And I'm going to illuminate that. Blur, forgive me for the blurring. And now we've got a more controlled sort of controlled setting of light sources. You are missing, I do miss his legs, I miss his feet. As a kid, what I used to do, when it was very difficult for me to draw feet, there was always grass, very convenient grass surrounding my paintings. And it was a grass that helped me in my fear of feet. I don't recommend you guys give in like I did because I still suffer from bad feet. Not bad foot odor. I mean, not in real life. Anyways, doesn't matter. Forget I said that. So what you want to do is get a good reference going. It'll really help, you know, get this guy out of here. I'm not really sure. You see, I'm having trouble with the feet already. It'll really help complete his figure. And cast this light all the way around him because he is sort of the main guy. If this is water underneath, then you're going to need to reflect that a little bit more three-dimensionally. Just like that, and then break away at it, of course, with the lasso tool. I use the lasso tool a lot. Me and the lasso tool have a special friendship. You guys aren't invited. I'm joking. So I'm using the smudge tool in this case just to help me through. And this is sort of the kind of reflection. Remember, it's reflected both in color. So I have to reflect, fuck, what did I do? I have to reflect both the color and the intensity. So I have to choose the exact colors I chose for this light source to be in here. So there would be the oranges, there would be the yellows, and then merge that down, and then there would be the intensity. It's just a list, guys. If you just write this list down, I swear to God, your life will change. I don't want it to be as bright as the anything else. I'm bringing that value down and being very, very greedy with where I place the intensity reflection. Finally, I don't like his eyes. I don't want them to be that glowy. There's so much space you have right now to give him some personality, and then the eyes are a big space, a great opportunity to bring in some personality for this guy. I mean, if you want him to have beautiful glowy eyes, just give him some blue eyes and it'll work as that. God damn it. Okay. So I'm just going to start defining his eye line. Some light source over here. When it comes to portraits, I just have the best time in critiques because the portraits are just my favorite thing to do. The face is so complicated. To be able to paint the face is an accomplishment in itself. So don't worry if you had a couple of issues here, a couple of fears you were trying to deal with. So there's the eye. I kind of want to get a little bit more involved with the other eye. An opportunity to just throw some lashes over. Okay, one last thing about this face. Let me show you some contour lines. This, if you were to place a piece of tape along his head, along his forehead, it would go like bloop, 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 and then it would do a little bloop, and then it would go back down and disappear into his chin. We've got this huge cheekbone that we're telling everyone that there is a cheekbone. But over here, it's like his cheekbone got carved away. This cheekbone is gone, disappeared. So basically, this is the clue. When you guys have this piece of tape, all you really have to do, and this is the biggest cheat, this is the cheat of all cheats, this is a cheat to end all cheats, is, and I've shown this before, and the response was great, it was reflect horizontally, tilt it back. Of course you have to do a better job, but you literally get the outline, fit it across. You literally get the outline you're supposed to get for the other cheek. You have to do a good job here though, you can't fuck it up like I did. So if you want to use it as a guide, just have it there. Go on liquefy, dang it. Go on filter, liquefy, and show backdrop. Oh crap, it's just going to show the backdrop. Never mind, it's not going to show the new layer. And just remember that piece of tape, and then start responding to the contour that it was telling us that there was. So I'm aligning the eyes backward. Actually cancel. I'm just going to flatten the image. No, fuck. I'm going to delete this, flatten, okay. And then now I'm going to, just so I can get the eyes to be aligned, I'm going to push that cheekbone out. As you're telling me there is a cheekbone, I'm going to push it out. Push the nose out as well. You're telling me there's this big lump of fat under his lip like men have when they get older. Because men are ugly and girls are the best. I'm joking. There's going to be that little bit over here, and there's going to be the chin. And then of course there needs to be that definition on the jawline as it hits the ear. And then I'm going to decrease that and push it over here. Okay, so now the chin, now the face has that response, that three-dimensional response. And he's looking very realistic to me. Oh, what a noob drawing. It's not noob, don't be silly. This is a lot to take in, this kind of painting, and kudos to you. You're definitely improving intensely since I last spoke with you. Remember those cast shadows on the sockets that I threw? Did you see how I chose an order for the critiques and I didn't follow it? God, I'm such an idiot. Okay, so burn. And make sure I'm casting the shadows for his sockets, his eye sockets. Remember, the sockets are there even skeletal. Let me go into my handy dandy resource folder. And I always use CritiqueHour resources. Okay, the whole of the eyes is an actual skeletal whole, meaning everything that isn't skeleton is all flesh. And if there is this skeletal structure, if in the inherent skeletal structure there is a shadow casting, these shadows will still be cast when there is flesh wrapped around and when there is the anatomy of the eyeball included. If you think about where the skeletal structure is on the face, you see these cheekbones? One of the side of the cheekbones had cheekbones for you and the other didn't. This is because you weren't thinking about the inherent skeletal structure underlying everything. So don't forget that. I'm sorry, I just smacked the microphone. I'm really passionate about this. Don't forget that, okay? Okay. So, I'm just throwing a little bit more. And then finally I'm going to get the lightest version I ever want to use of the Lightsource color. And I'm just throwing it over here. Just in the areas that are really getting that illumination. His arm might be sweating, might be getting that arm sweat. His boobies might be sweating. Then we're getting some of the metallic reflection of budget on the armor. Not too much that it takes away from his face. And then I'm just taking this away, and then flatten the image. Same thing on here. I'm choosing the most intense of the secondary light source. And I'm placing it on the areas that are getting the most of that light source. So the illumination of his boobies, again. The bottoms of... I'll blend that in a second. Actually, I'll blend it now because it'll kill me if I don't. I need that clash as well. So outlining the sides of his boobies. When I say clash, I mean this line that outlines areas where there is an interruption of the light source clashing with the main shadow or the main core shadows that are going on. Okay. Enough, stop collecting them. This is embarrassing. What will the people say when I'm dead and gone? They will only have these embarrassing moments, my vocabulary, to remember me by. Okay, so that's it. I've concentrated the light sources. Give him a bit more structure for his breasts and his pecs. Why am I going here? You know what? I'm just placing you on top. Let me save, and then I'll show you the before and after. You ready? Before, the side of his head was catching another light. There was no focus. The arm was too illuminated. Then we had this little details here taking away from the light source. Then we had a fourth light source that was sort of taking away from the anatomy of his eyes. We had no response to the light source in the body. We had some response to the light source over here, but not in all of the areas that the light would normally touch. His whole form was like a badly taken photo. He wasn't really centered in the image. There was no composition involved. And now we've brought in another color palette to make it a little bit more interesting. We gave him some eyeballs to make his personality a bit more accessible. And then we've responded to the light source. They're all tiny little touches. Beautiful painting. You guys have been giving me beautiful stuff today. Tiny little touches, and it turns into movie-ready concept art. Because you've thought about all the realism and all the things that could be considered physically, which is the physics of it all at the end of the day. It's just physics. I'll save this and I'll send it back to you. By the way, if I don't send you back your stuff, please send me a message on Facebook so that I could send it back. Took care of that, took care of that, took care of that. There's this image. This is a different thing. For this one, it was mostly, I think you used the study. I think this painting is familiar to me. Mostly it was the fact that her head was sort of crushed on one side. So I'm just giving her back some space for her features. And then it was her bone structure that needs to be visible along the side. Even if she's hefty, even if she's a bit heavy, she's still going to need some bone structure in there, as if there is a skeleton involved in her form, which there is. And if her dress is sort of blah, 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 then sorry, I ran out of a word. I didn't have a word, so I just made the sound, which is something I do. If her dress is what's the word? Frilly, then we would get the frill over here, but we still need to show that there is a sort of crushing of her fat along the seam of her dress. And then we have the compression of her armpit on the side along the bone structure. Then we have the hair sitting on the structure of the shoulder, so what would happen is it would get a sudden cut where the hair is sitting, defining the edge of the shoulder. Along the hairline is on the shoulder, and then the hair would just be falling along the structure of the shoulder. I'm using Liquify for this, please forgive me. Then there would be the jawline that would be visible if she were to sit like that. So remember, you're only softening edges of fat. You're not softening bone edges. So this was an edge problem here. Edges of fat are the areas where you can blend into the background with some gradual tones. But everything else needs to stay edged. So the jawline is sort of form of that. I'm kind of confused with what you want to do with this because you covered it with hair. But that's pretty much it for this painting. I'm not sure if it was a study. One more touch. I'm not sure if it was a study, so I don't know if I'm going to be painting it, sort of deviating you away from what the study was doing. But let's say it wasn't. Let's say it was just you. There would need to be some of that light source on her face. Wherever the light source is coming from, it seems to be coming from this side this way. So we need to get some of that light source color, at least just to unify the palette a little bit. We need some of that here on the bone structure areas that are catching the light source. So I'm just going to stipple to try to create your texture. We need some casting happening from the eyebrows to the eyes. And there's something that you guys miss a lot, and I always talk about it. It's the shadow of the upper eyelid on the eyeball. Such an important little thing. It does so much for making the eyes look realistic, because at that point you're treating it as a three-dimensional object. Why? Because cast shadows make something look three-dimensional, because whoa, there's something in front of something and there's a light, and then there's that something that happens called a shadow on that other something that's behind that first something. And that's all physics. More physics you've got in your painting, the more real and more easy accessible it is. Then there's the top part of the eyeball. Hooded eyes have fat structures that sit on top of the eyelid, pushing the crease of the eyelid down. So what would need to happen, well, you're telling me that there's a mountain range here, and that mountain range needs to be reinforced. So there's that crease here, and then there's the light. So do you see what happened to that? Her face is all of a sudden so much more accessible and so much more relatable, because you've got cast shadows happening. And that's what happens when you think about the physics. And I might sneeze. Okay, so I'm throwing some light, threw some light along the brows by just shrinking my brush and creating that brow texture. You have a beautiful opportunity here to create some pretty brows. Then there's that other trick that makes eyes look realistic. Now I'm going to sneeze. What happens is that you drop to the color of the eyeball, the whites of the eye, and then you drag it over the eye, because this in a sense is you responding to the moisture of that area. Water diffuses colors that stand behind it or in it, and that's what happens here. And we need to show that the eye structure is a big liquid structure, and that sort of happens. And you see how beautiful the eyes are now. I love painting eyes. The eyes are so much more real and so much more emotional, and her smile is so much, again, more accessible and relatable. And that's what you want in a portrait. You want to capture the realism of that person, so that not just so that you can show off your art skills and that you're a realism master, it's that you can create a new human being. And that's really what we're here for. It's to bring in what's in our imagination. Other areas of reflection that are moisture versus not really matte is the under eye area. Very, very wet and very, very oily. It's basically like lubricating an engine. Basically, for the function of the eye to be consistent, it has to be lubricated and constantly moist, so that its function is reinforced. And that's another huge thing about anatomy. When you're dealing with anatomy, is function. You have to remember which parts are functioning, and are you painting them in a way that allows them to function as they would in real life. And again, it's all about realism and all of that jazz. I would throw some secondary light source, but I don't want to mess around too much. I'm really going to sneeze. Go away. Okay, some cast shadows here. And then some light here to show that there is reflection happening on her brush, just like I showed Carlo earlier. And then that edge work that needs to happen along the sides. Not so much edge work, because this is a fatty area of the breast, so it can't be that dark. So you have to make sure that you're blending it, or that edged out, that sharp, so you have to make sure you're blending it in a way where it's still soft. And you see how now we're representing the sort of, I honestly don't have a word for boobs that, what is the word for, sorry. The bounciness of the breasts, the jiggliness of the water balloonness of the breasts. That's sort of what's happening here. We want to show that they're sitting on some sort of corset or something. And then we've got the sides of the arms that are reflecting some light back. And then we've got the main core shadow that travels along the arms. So if you guys are feeling like I'm going too fast, this will be uploaded on YouTube. So don't worry about that too much. Just throwing, never mind, I'm not going to mess around with that. Okay, so that's it for this. I'm going to show you the before and after. A couple of little tricks about symmetry. So the head was a bit compressed. You see that? It was like squished. And then we've had the fat of the side sticking out with no bone structure, nothing to reinforce the bone structure. If she was heavier, it would look like this. But I do want to see you as the student show me that there is a skeletal structure underneath. And we brought that eyeshadow back, the light back into the eyes by casting some shadows, and it made her look a lot more realistic. Casting that shadow. Just a little bit more. It could really disappear into a portrait painting. Okay, and that's that. And then I'm going to look at Melly's, I think it was. And I think that would be it. Marvy. Let me see if I missed anyone. Laura sent me lots of studies. Oh, there's that one. I don't have time for that one. And there's this one I can rush over real quick. For this one, Marvy, it's a detail problem. It's the same thing I've been talking about this whole time. There is a detail issue here when you're painting the hair. You always, again, want to make sure that the radius is set focused so that the most detail happens along the face, and then everything else is less in detail. So if this is 100%, this is 80%. And this hair, you're using almost the same size hair brush as the eyes. And then even further, you've used the tiniest, teeny weeniest little brush for the hairs here. Okay guys, all 30 of you, listen to me. When you paint hair, just because hair is a million different strands in real life doesn't mean you have to paint every single one of those strands in your painting, okay? You can represent the chunks and major groups of that hair and treat it as a single object. So with eyebrows, unless you have eagle eyes, you're not going to see every single little hair strand. What you see is the general shadow. The general shadow of that area. And you don't want ever to be the eyes the least detailed compared to the brows. You want to make sure that you're painting in a way where the eyes in a portrait are the most detailed, usually, are the detailed areas of the eyebrow. So, what the fuck am I saying? The detail of the eyebrow cannot be more than the detail of the eyes, okay? There's also this tiny little hooded thing that you were doing, and then there's the shadow of the eyebrow casting underneath the skeletal structure is has lights on it that have to be entertained when you're working with Lightsource. What the heck am I saying anymore? Did I just run out of mind? There's some Lightsource casting over here on the inner corner, and there's that initial shadow. You don't want it to look like a realistic cartoon. You know what I'm saying? So you got to start blending away some of these excessive details that you have. Also, there is, again, that moisture reflection that happens with the eyes that we would need to see. And then that inner corner illumination. Moisture versus dry. Which areas are moist. And there's the sides here and the inner corner here. Areas that you can't really blend. And then when it comes to the eyebrows in this case, you have to start thinking about eyebrow growth direction. Eyebrow doesn't really grow like tiny little hairs all in the same direction. It grows in like a fish bone. So the first parts grow this way, the top parts grow downward, and then the bottom parts grow upward, and then the main train grows this way. So it starts to look like a fishbone, sort of. And you have to follow that, and all the hairs meet at one end. So when I place these light these lighter areas of the brow, I'm going to be following that growth direction so they look a little bit more realistic, like they're, see what that did? So that it looks realistic. I don't need to paint every tiny little teeny weeny hair and spend 30 minutes just on one eyebrow, or an hour, God forbid. You can just represent the largest structures of this eyebrow very quickly with well-placed, strategically placed brush strokes. And that's called stroke economy. That's being smart with your brushes, with your brush strokes, not using too many brush strokes to represent one tiny little object. The forehead is just one plain light. It needs to be, shade. It needs to be shaded as well. And the forehead tends to have this on-switch type shading. So there is a dark spot between the eyebrows. And this dark spot, when you look at the face from the side, it looks like you've got the nose and then the eyes. This dip right here in the profile, so you've got the lips and then you've got the nose and then you've got the eyes. This dip is translated as a shadow here. We need that to tell me that this is a face that basically, if she had this kind of lighting, her eyebrow would connect straight to her nose. So it would look like, and then her eyes would be here, and then her chin, and then her lips. If there's no dip translated here, then there's no dip translated here. And so this whole area is sharing one big light source color all the way across, which is basically what you're telling me is this. It's sharing this kind of light source color. Basically, there's no interrupt in that big altitude, that mountain. Okay? So that's not good. You have to fix that. Just like this. And you see what happened when we started messing around with the eyebrows? They look a lot more realistic, and they're really reading very, very well. These lashes that you have, yeah, you've painted them in a way where it's growing along the lash line, but again, it's the same issue. We cannot have every single little highlight hair painted, because that's an excess amount of detail. It almost enters the uncanny, because that's what the uncanny is. It's just bringing in false realism into an object that cannot possibly be real in its state. Just search up realistic Homer Simpson, and you can yell at me after for making you see that, because you can't unsee that, let me tell you. Stay away from that uncanny style of painting. It's like adding tiny little hairs. Even if you took a photograph, you wouldn't be able to see every tiny little hair. You'd see groups jumbled up together in the pixels. And that's what we want to do. We want to represent how the eye takes shortcuts when it looks at an object in real life. Also, the darks used are a bit too dark. And to lighten those up. And then the color that you used for the eyes is a bit of an unrealistic color. I mean, you can get away with that a lot, using like a red or something. But try not to depend on the rule breaking to make up for the rule break of try not to use rule breaking to fix rule breaking. Style and all of that is not something that you're ready to experiment with just yet. So try to do some realistic studies, the way real colors happen with real light sources. It's hard to know what a red eye does if you're not looking at an albino person, and it kind of looks wrong with all that dark around it, because usually there's zero pigmentation in albino. But that's your choice. That's a stylistic choice. I'm casting that shadow over here, the shadow of the upper eyelid on the rest of the eye. Very essential shadow. And now, because you used makeup, I'm just going to bring in some of that shadow along her crease line and up into the eye. So now what we're seeing is a more realistic representation of her eyebrow and her whole eye structure. Don't connect the nose like that. Sometimes the bridge of the nose is an overstatement. It's not really needed. And I'm going to jump into the liquefy real quick, because the corners of the eyes aren't really sitting along the skeletal structure underneath. I'm trying to make it seem like they're not just symbolic eye, but an actual functioning eye. Then there's the shadow cast by the eyebrow along the eye, just like that. Not that intense, but I did it so you guys could see it. Okay, and then for the nose, Everything is too soft cut, like you're using editorial. It's a photo shoot. We need to see some solid cast shadows being sent down. There's the shadow of the lip on top of the chin. That's completely missing. We need to definitely have that in there. And then there's this shadow of the whole head. There's a core shadow that runs along the entire skull structure, and it's half the head and shadow. And the only things that interrupt it are the mountain sides. So it's light spots versus dark spots. These are the light spots, those essential signifiers of the features, the main features of the face, which are also signifiers. And there's the corner of the lips. And this is constant reinforcement of the cube. It's all about the cube. The cube is the diva, and you guys have to give it what it wants. If it wants shrimp covered chocolate covered shrimp with diet soda and all the Elmo episodes of Sesame Street, you're gonna have to bring them. That was a dumb joke. Okay. So the eyebrow, the forehead, I didn't shade that. The on switch. So the on switch looks like this. Does the forehead, the upper areas of the eyebrow, and then the top frontal lobe of the forehead. So what we're left with is this little bump that leads us into the dip of the nose right over here. So we're giving 3D structure, and then we've got the secondary light source sitting along right here. And we've got the clash between the primary shadow, core shadow, and then the secondary light source diffusing it. If this is too if this is too muscular, skeletal for you, all you have to do is thin out or blend in the shadow that is happening between the cheeks. So if the cheeks have more fat in them, that edge is less visible. And then you can bring in those illuminations on the eye, so those moments of glow on the inner eye and on the eyeball itself. Now you know that whatever illumination you place in will be placed in realistically, and you won't be placing it in random areas. So before, you had that core shadow going, but half the face wasn't in shadow. You had it only around the lips, and the lips had these like spotlight of their own. And then you had the eyebrow shape really awkwardly placed. There was no halo of shadow. Every tiny little strand of hair casts a shadow, but you don't have to paint every tiny little strand of hair. Yeah, not so dark and not so edgy for chubbier faces. If the thinner the face, the harsher the shadows. And then after, we have that realistic glow. I'm going to place in, because I painted away, I'm just going to place in that light source on the cheekbone. I'm going to bring in actually one lighter shade that is more yellow. And remember how I showed you how to paint that sphere in a way that's three-dimensional? Build up. I'm building up the light. Just like that. Okie dokie. So before, after. I don't have time for another, actually, I'm very sorry. Thank you everyone for coming. Remember that my critiques are obsolete. They are not the be-all and end-all of opinion on your painting. Its fundamentals exist whether or not Istebrak is alive. Remember that my critiques are given to you with my habits, not really style. You don't really have style early on. I don't have style. I'm not advanced that much advanced. All I have is habits. Remember that there are habits and tastes that I'm applying to your image. If you apply the fundamentals with your tastes, it's going to look different, but it's still going to look realistic. The fundamentals, this golden list of things you should have in a painting, are physics, are laws of physics, are things that happen in real life, observable sciences. That is it. That is the only disclosure that I want to make sure you guys know. This is not the only way that your image will look good. It's not. There are different ways of making an image look nice. There are rules you can break. But remember that fundamentals are part of the learning, and you have to learn the rules before you break them.